Welcome to the Divorce Couch. This is Simone. I'm the divorce coach in Germany.
I am Salma, and I'm a divorce coach based in London.
And hi, I'm Claire. I'm a divorce coach based in the north of Ireland.
We're happy to see you. Grab a coffee, grab a tea. Today we are recording actually a bit later. Have a wine for all you want. Today, we're talking about something which is connecting to our previous episode, but it goes a level deeper. It's about the inner strength. And I mean, if we talked about the dark times in our previous episode, this is the moment when you imagine you wake up at the middle of the night, and I think we've all been there. And what branch of hope do you cling on to calm yourself and to know everything is going to be all right? So when we talked about how we should begin this or what we will talk on this episode, I think the words that came into mind are rituals, spirituality, maybe even a bit of superstition. This is our 3 stories. It's a narrative episode. None of that is set in stone. If we talk about our beliefs, please don't take it as a given. This is how we navigated moments which were tough. And if you're watching, you know exactly what moments I'm referring to. Who would like to begin and share your story?
I think one thing I'd like to, just off the back of what you've just said, Simone, is that it's when you're in that period, it really does feel like this is never going to be over. This is how I'm going to feel like, you can't see the end of the tunnel. And, I think sometimes it's really frustrating when, people like ourselves who have come through that are sitting there and saying, just hang in there. There is light at the end of the tunnel. You are going to get through this, but we really are speaking from experience, that it may not feel like that right now. It may feel like everything that could possibly go wrong is going wrong, but it's life is like, I suppose, for want of a another cliche type of word, is that it is like a season, and it's not going to rain forever. You just need to sort of hang in there, and it will, at some point, things will start settling down, turning around. The dark times are really difficult to navigate, but they don't last forever.
What did you do when you experienced yours?
What did I do? I suppose one of the things that we discussed at this time was, when we were talking about this episode, was this whole idea of, how spirituality came into it. And I think for myself, my mom is a very religious, she's got very strong faith. And one of the things that she would often say to me at that time is, just pray, it's going to be okay. But at the time, I remember getting incredibly angry when she said that, because I was so angry, and I was finding it quite hard to, imagine that I could hold on to this sort of entity or faith that I could not sort of grab onto, and almost like have this blind faith that, well, if I pray hard enough, or if I, believe hard enough, that actually I'm going to get through this. So I think it's really, for me, that was quite frustrating when people said that to me. Now, in hindsight, I hold on to that a lot more, because I think I didn't really have that level of faith during that time. And, during my sort of healing process, I have been able to sort of, I suppose, reevaluate that and see that actually sometimes it is about just having a blind faith and a hope that I'm going to get through this. And whether that is, a God that you're praying to, or the universe that you're reaching out to, or whether that is just something deep inside you that knows that you have that strength that's what you're holding on to, that's what's going to get you through. I think, you know, we can give it any name we want, but it is really important to find that. And I think in hindsight, I wish that I'd taken my mum's advice more seriously, because I think it would have saved me a lot of, I suppose, because I was angry, that anger needed to be redirected. And in my case, that anger was redirected towards God.
So, but then you didn't. So basically, you then didn't pray. You just went with your
beginning. Yeah, in the beginning, I didn't.
But so you did come to a point where you invited the prayer and the.
Yeah, I think I needed it from a perspective that I did get to a point where I needed something to latch onto. I had tried lots of different things, and I think it's finally when I found that faith to hold on to. I just needed something to just grab hold of so tightly that almost in some ways not took the responsibility away from me, but gave me that sort of, when I think of it in my mind, I think of like a concrete pole stuck in the ground that I could just hold on to, and the wind is blowing and I'm getting thrashed left, right and center, but I'm holding on to that I'm not going to let go of this. And I know that eventually the storm's going to subside.
Claire, how about you? Because we know that you were in church. How did that help you? I mean, you talk about church a lot and your belief. How did that in those moments really guide you, assist you, support you?
I think, you know, a lot of my journey has been about looking back, looking forward, where I am. So in some of the times that I felt were really, really difficult and really tough, you know, that I remember a client said to me one day, you know, have you ever been where I am? And I said, well, if you mean crying with my back against the wall at 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark, if that's what you mean by that question, then yes, I have. I have been that person. I have been there. And I think, you know, our journey did some IVF. And I remember the first time we did IVF, we got pregnant on the first one. And I was like, oh, Lord, this is amazing. So my natural conversation involves my faith, because it's like, my relationship with God is part of who I am. It's like breathing for me. So it just comes out in all sorts of ways. And I remember walking by the sea, and I remember that time saying to God, you know, this baby is yours. This is our gift. It is from you. It is ours. And I hand this gift back to you in whatever form, you know, with the privilege of being a mum. And about 6 weeks later, I miscarried. And so I remember so clearly going to church after that. And I remember, you know, church for me was a place that invoked a lot of emotions, because it's almost like I let God touch me in a way that I had protection around outside, but it was like, oh, you can see my pain. And I remember hearing a song, and I didn't know where the song came from. And the song was by a guy called Matt Redmond, and it was, blessed be your name, you give and you take away, blessed be your name. And it just spoke to me. So I have found on my journey, music and songs have gone straight through the core of my soul and just touched me in a way that something with that. And I found that God used those things to help me. What I discovered afterwards, because I did a bit of research, is that song was written by that couple after they had a miscarriage. And I didn't know that, but it spoke to me so much. And I thought, they know my pain. They wrote that song about my pain. And it meant that I felt I wasn't alone. So when I left my ex-husband, I had that in my past, which was acutely painful in a very different way. And at that point, we didn't know if we'd have children. And we went on and did 2 more IVFs, 2 more miscarriages before we had our boys through a non-IVF route. But I didn't know that. So this is the sense of, you're in the middle of this and you just don't know. You can't see what it's going to look like. And so I remember when I left Peter, because he was a minister and it was in the church, there's sort of a layer of guilt and shame that goes with that. And I was a minister's wife, and this feeling of letting people down, and is it okay for me to want something different to the normal, and lots of different. I think my moments of that 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark, when I had permission by my friends to ring some of them. I just didn't know how to do that. And I didn't do that. And I just remember there were certain times when I just cried as if my heart was going to break. But I never felt alone. I may have felt lonely, but I never actually felt alone. And all during my journey, what I would say is, I sensed that God answered needs that I had before I knew I had the need. Got the answer, I realized I needed that, but I didn't know before I got whatever it would happen to be, that I needed that thing. So I began to build up an evidence pathway that I wasn't in this on my own, and that if God was with me, then I would be okay. Because in my belief, God is bigger than the bad stuff. Bad stuff happens to everyone. Like shit happens. That's just the way life is. And when we can understand that happens, I think there's a slightly different coping mechanism. But my evidence pathway in my soul was that I have been at a breaking point before and I have survived. So my dark moments, I remember standing in church one day with my children. It must have been about 2.5 years down the line. And they were singing a song that I'd never heard before. And the song was, standing on this mountaintop, looking at how far I've come. And it went on in the chorus to say, you have never once left me. You have never left me walk alone. And the words of that song pierced my soul, because I thought, I have never felt left alone. It has been really tough. It had been tough beyond my ability to understand before I started the journey. But my feet were always on a rock, even if I didn't feel it. When something touched me in a way that I needed to hear it for whatever the next thing was, I realized that they were. And over time, what I began to realize is that I saw a different side to the God that I believed in. I saw a side of compassion through the world that I was living in, through other people, that I couldn't have seen if I hadn't been in that journey. So as I have come through my divorce, I have seen different sides of the God that I believed in, that I saw in one way, and now realize there are so many more facets, and I have seen and experienced so much more. So one of the things for me is this feeling of, where is compassion on the divorce journey, especially for people with the faith, when there is so much of, well, you should pray about it and God can do a miracle and all of those things. And that is what I have held on to. So words of songs, lines in books. I underline every book I read now, because there's always something to stand out. And what I find is I go back a year later and go, something else is interesting that picks up. So my inner strength has come from being open to seeing and hearing, where might there be a message in? And in my world, I believe it's from God. And I believe it's either a confirmation I'm on the right path, or it is a strength to hold on and go forward. But that's my journey.
Simone?
Yeah, this is very intense today. I didn't have a family that was like your Salma, a mom, or you who have Claire, who has been in a religious environment. I had none of that. I'm German. I don't know. We talk about agnosticism and atheism. So I shouldered these 3 a.m. moments all by myself. And these, when you just said those words, have I been there? Yes. And then immediately it's still in us. You know what? I can still feel it immediately in my body. I think I said that I had a therapist, and the therapist didn't really help me. It was more of, what would happen to my family time. And then I visited a coach. She wasn't a divorce coach, but she said something, and then I looked at her and I said, you must be nuts. And she says, you know what, you have to let go. You have so much weight on your shoulders. You have to release it. Can you ask for help? Can you pray? And I looked at her and I said, nope, I am not the person who asks for help. I mean, there's a lot of upbringing now coming into play. And I didn't think I was worth to ask for help. I said, no, I can't. And she says, but try. And so I went home And I looked myself in the mirror and I couldn't. I couldn't. It was just too much to just, it was so abstract. But you know what, eventually I kept asking and I kept trying, and I think I did better, but there was nothing like you, Claire, and Selma. I think you had experienced a similar situation. It didn't come back. There was no knot that was all of a sudden. We have this German saying, is there an English thing when the knot almost opens?
Unravels, yeah.
But now listen to this. I have a story. It was shoulders heavy. And you know what? I thought, I can't bear it. There was nothing that I could have taken on anymore. I was so burdened with what was happening. So it was Christmas time. I'm driving. It's raining. I'm driving to pick up the kids. Cliff Richard plays Mistletoe and Wine. It's loud music. Yeah. And I am crying. I said, God, I could have driven the car right to the next pole. I was just so overwhelmed. All of a sudden, it was so intense. All of a sudden, I feel this energy, this warmth. And it was basically maybe like 2 or 3 seconds, and it was gone. My pain, my heaviness, my weight, there was an energy with me in that car, and it was an encounter. And I know that, you know what, we this is a very special episode. This is nothing I probably would write into a book. You know what, this is the way forward. All I am saying is I felt I wasn't alone. And from that moment onwards, I had a strategy from what I wanted. I manifested it in, I don't know, in little, knotted armbands, in candles I blew out. I wrote it on locks, and when I knew what I wanted, and I knew I'm not alone, and all of a sudden I realized I can do it, I started to manifest what I wanted. And I brought with me something, it's like similar what you had, when the day I was allowed to leave Singapore and go to my home country and start to become independent. I had this cafe in which we went every day, and it was a religious cafe. So it had little notes, little citations from the Bible. It said this: on the day I was allowed to go home, we may be tempted sometimes to conclude that because God doesn't fix our problem, he doesn't love us. There are many things that he does not fix precisely because he loves us. Instead of extracting us from the problem, he calls us in our sorrow or loneliness or pain. He calls, this is a necessary part of the journey. Even if it is the roughest part, it is only a part, and it will not last the whole long way. Remember where I am leading you. Remember what you will find at the end, a home, and a heaven, and a heaven. I mean, that just blew my mind. When it's not that I am now a churchgoer, I'm not religious, but I absolutely feel it is important to hand yourself over when the burden gets too much. Ask for help, whatever it is, just ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we are, as humans, there is a spiritual side to us, because there are so many different ways that people look to fill it. So I think something that reason and understanding doesn't necessarily have to be processed for that part. A lot of the stuff I have is a sense I've had that I felt, when I was listening to what you were reading out, Simone, I remember a song that I literally had on repeat for like 3 weeks in a row, and it was called There's Another in the Fire, and it was talking about Daniel in the fire back in the Old Testament. And the song that just went, There's Another in the Fire, was for me the stamp of I'm not alone. And that's how I interpreted it. But there's lots of other people that will interpret something different but feel the same. And it's the feeling of there's something bigger than us there, and we're not alone. And I think sometimes as humans, we have to get to the end of our ability completely before we're able to let go, because letting go is not what we're made to do. Like, we're just not. I've held on to so many things for so long. It's like, I just wish it was easier, and it's not. because of our journey or because of our experience or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
If it is it possible, sorry, Sana, if the praying and, handing yourself over is maybe too abstract, I was just thinking to bring it back to coaching. Maybe it's possible also to write it down on the piece of paper and then basically just get it out of your system. The thoughts, the pain, it's unbearable. Maybe, write it on a piece of paper, put it, maybe burn it or send it away and say, I need to get rid of this for now. I need to basically find more space within me because I need to be that for my children. Maybe write it on a piece of paper in a diary. You journal, Salma. Do you think that is something?
Yes, I do journal. Yes, I journal daily, every morning. Even if it's, sometimes it's a few minutes if I feel like there's nothing that I want to offload, or I journal for longer. On quite difficult days, then what I will do is I will journal on some loose sheets of paper and I will write and write and write until I've offloaded whatever emotion it is that I'm finding it difficult to deal with. And then I will go out into my garden and set it alight I've got a little fire, a wood burner type of thing. And if I feel that I still need to write more, I will come back inside and write some more.
Oh, wow.
And I find that really, it's like I've offloaded so much. But just coming back to what you said earlier, when you were reading the quote from the Bible, I think what I learned during my journey, and it's I suppose what Claire said as well about letting go, is to really sort of think about what is it that you're holding on to. Because I think one of the reasons that I was really angry is because I didn't want my marriage to fail, but I didn't want it to fail at any costs because I didn't want my marriage to fail. But actually, in reality, me and my ex-husband were not good for each other. And for us to have stayed together for the sake of not wanting our marriage to have failed, it would have meant possibly both of us changing our personalities quite drastically, which was not ever going to happen. And so I think when I got to the point where I realized, well, actually, what am I not letting go of? Because what I was holding on to was what I wanted my life to look like, what I'd hoped my life would have looked like. But that is not what my life was. And it's highly likely that no matter how much I would have held on to that, that isn't what my life would have been. Because we were just so, I don't know what the right word is to use, obviously. I wouldn't say, we were just not good together in terms of, both of us were doing damage to each other.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just, this wasn't a one-way thing. We just were not, after, during the difficult period, there would have been so much for us both to change that was never realistic. That was never going to happen. And then I think once I realized that actually what I'm holding on to is not realistic, it was easier to let go.
So what you're saying, I mean, this is already the next step. What I'm getting here is it is probably that painful at that particular moment because you are in inevitable transition.
Yeah.
But at that particular moment, but probably own that resistance because what is happening next will mean change. And this is probably what you're saying is it becomes so painful because it is so difficult to accept.
Yeah.
The change, the transition. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to face those dark moments.
Very important. Yeah. Face them. They're part of that.
Encourage a lot of my clients to do is not hide from those emotions. You know, I still do this till today is, you know, if I'm feeling upset or anxious or worried about something, is to remind myself that it's okay to feel that. If there's things that I should be worried about, you know, because once I acknowledge that, yes, I've got lots of reasons to be sad today, you know, back during that time, or I have got a valid reason to be feeling, you know, angry today, rather than, you know, what we often do is when we're feeling a certain emotion, especially if it's a negative emotion, we almost kind of turn that inwards and say, well, I should be able to handle this, right? I should be able to put this aside and not be angry. Why should we be able to do anything? Why can we not just take a moment to acknowledge that actually I have lots of reasons right now to be sad and tearful, and I'm going to accept that. And then, rather than beat myself up about being sad because my marriage is falling apart.
And when it comes to the point where you're not moving, and we have those people as well that are so basically their divorce is their diagnosis, right? They're stuck. It's a cul-de-sac. They cannot move. Then maybe someone else needs to guide you and help you. Could be a therapist, could be a coach. But you know what, for now, what we have experienced, and that's probably what we have chosen to make divorce coaching our new path, is we have witnessed those dark moments and we have dealt with them in various ways. And one of them is basically to hand yourself or the burden over to something just to make space. Kind of like, you know what, to calibrate, to say, you know what, I have to just get rid of something. It's just, I can't. And who else can you give it on than a piece of paper and burn it, or to a god, or to pray to the universe? Yeah.
I remember when I did a session about journaling, and it was really, really interesting. It was in a women's group that I was in online. And she was talking about how journaling works. And I didn't understand it before, because I journal on and off, but I'm not good at doing it on a regular basis, but I try and do important things. And she was saying that when we start to write, we don't think the same way. So it's almost like we can move our strength of thoughts and almost move them aside. And what's behind the emotion of anger or upset is able to come to the fore. So we're able to find it ourselves and get it out. And as you were saying there, you know, when we get it out, then we have space, but it's getting it out.
Yes.
And, you know, that understanding of the journaling process, I have found helpful. So one of the things when I look back at my dark moments that I did was I read lots of books, or I mean, I didn't do podcasts because I didn't know how to do them at that point. I'm becoming more tech savvy. I probably did YouTube videos, TED Talks, that kind of stuff. But I started to learn about different things because it engaged my brain. And again, there's a science that talks about when you engage your brain doing something different, you cope better with stress.
Yeah.
And that I can identify with that for me as part of my how did I manage? What did I do? That's definitely one of them.
Yeah. And on the point of journaling, I think this is something that I've probably done, you know, even prior. Obviously, I have done, because as some of those listening will know, that I'm actually in the process of moving. So we've been having this massive clear out. And over the weekend, I found a journal that I was keeping during the latter part of the breakdown of my marriage. And I found this notepad, and it was all very nice. And I thought, on the outside, but I didn't remember. I thought, oh, what's this at the bottom of my sort of one of my drawers in my bedroom? And I opened it up and I started reading through it. And in some ways it was incredibly painful to read, because some of the things that I'd written were, you know, how I was feeling at that moment in time. But it also gave me that moment of pleasure, sitting here 7 years later, to think, oh my God, that's what I was going through at that point in time. And now I'm not there anymore. Like, although I felt like so liberated, because that was a very, you know, dark time, and obviously writing during that time was something that was helping me, because it's pages and pages of this, like on a very similar sort of trail, but it did, there was being able to offload those thoughts is really helpful. And I always see it as, when I'm journaling in the morning, it's almost like I wake up and I've got all of this like sort of jumbled up ball of wool in my head, and when I'm journaling, I'm almost like unraveling all of that, and at the end of my journaling I have a nice nicely gathered ball of wool that I could then use.
I like that image.
Yeah.
I'll wrap up, and I will finish with something that I Googled, what spirituality is. And I think everything that we have just explained is exactly that. It's basically the quality of being concerned with the human spirit. And everything that we've just experienced, whether it is praying or whether it is journaling or whether it is writing on a piece of paper, at that particular moment, while we're experiencing that pain, what we do is we go inwards. There is nothing, we're not going backwards and rethink what just happened. We're not fearful at that particular moment. We are not going into the future, which is fear and anxiety. What we're doing, because we can't, I think there's probably no more capacity in us at that particular moment, which is so painful. We can't deal with the past and we can't deal with the anxiety of the future. So what we do is we go inwards, and then we look into our soul, and then we know it's too much. And then this is basically when the meditation comes in, or when we write down, or when we pray. Basically, we're aligned with our soul, with our thoughts, with our pain. It's basically all the three things in the doing in one. And then we give it to the world and say, no, take it. I need to make space. And it was a much calmer episode today. Thank you very much. Be interesting to find out how you cope. I hope maybe we could give you a couple of ideas what to do in those moments. Take them. It's a big, big sign that something in you is working. And take it, offload, trust, believe, and have faith. Have absolute faith. We are proof. How Claire said, the 3 a.m. pain, we are proof.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. We're with you. Like our channel, subscribe and share. See you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.